The Gulf was supposed to be cooling down. That was the point of the April ceasefire. Stop the open spiral, give diplomats a lane, and let everyone pretend the worst chapter was behind them. Then June arrived. American strikes hit Iranian military surveillance, communication, and air defense sites. Iran answered with missiles and drones toward US linked bases around the Gulf. Tehran warned that the Strait of Hormuz could be closed to ships. Washington said commercial traffic was still moving. And while that argument was happening at sea, Israel was pushing deeper into Lebanon, including the capture of Beaufort Castle. So, if you thought the ceasefire meant the story was settling down, this week was the reminder. The ink was barely dry. Here's the simple version. The US says its strikes were defensive. Iran says its retaliation was a response to violations. Israel says its Lebanon operations are about security. Every side has a sentence that sounds clean enough for a press briefing. But underneath those clean sentences is the messier truth. Nobody wants to look weak. Nobody wants to absorb the next hit quietly. And nobody wants to be blamed for turning this into a wider war. That is why this moment matters. This is not just another headline from a region that always sounds tense. It is a test of whether a ceasefire can survive when the people inside it keep throwing punches, then insisting the fight has not restarted. Look, ceasefires are not magic. They are pressure containers. They do not erase the reasons people were fighting. They only create a temporary roof over the fire. And right now, that roof has holes in it. The most important pressure point is the Strait of Hormuz. You may not follow shipping routes every day, but this one matters. A huge share of the world's oil and gas flows near that narrow strip of water between Iran and Oman. When Iran talks about closing it, markets listen, governments listen, shipping companies listen, and every energy importing country feels the temperature rise. But here's the part I think gets missed. A full Hormuz closure is not a clean show of strength. It is also a sign of pain. Iran is under heavy economic pressure. Its exports have been squeezed. Its regional network has been damaged. Its leadership needs to show that it can still impose cost. So the message is not just, we can hurt you. It is also, if we are being choked, we can make the whole world system cough. That makes the threat dangerous, but also very complicated. If Iran actually keeps the strait closed for a long stretch, it risks inviting a much harder American response and deepening its own economic damage. If it only talks about closure and does nothing, the threat loses value. So, the likely space in between is messy. Harassment, warning, drone activity, insurance panic, selective incidents, and claims that are hard to verify in real time. That is the gray zone where miscalculation lives. Now, what does Washington want? The US wants Iran weaker, more constrained, and closer to accepting limits on its nuclear program, missiles, and regional armed partners. But it wants that without a giant oil shock and without a long open war that becomes politically poisonous at home. So Washington's preferred move is pressure with boundaries. Hit hardware, not symbolism. Strike radars and defense systems, not cities for spectacle. Signal pain, but leave a door open for talks. The problem is that Iran reads pressure differently. Tehran is not just calculating damage, it is calculating humiliation. If it absorbs strikes without answering, it looks exposed. If it answers too hard, it risks a larger war it probably does not want. So its answer becomes loud enough to be seen, but limited enough to survive. And then there is Israel. Israel's move in Lebanon adds a second fuse to the same box. While Washington and Tehran argue over the Gulf, Israel is trying to turn instability into a better security position in the north. From Israel's view, this is the moment to degrade Hezbollah and reshape the border. From Washington's view, that may be useful until it starts ruining the wider bargain. That is why the next real argument may not only be between America and Iran, it may be between America and Israel over how much Lebanon can be changed before the entire ceasefire structure cracks. I want to tell you something most coverage is missing. The dangerous part is not that everyone wants total war. The dangerous part is that everyone thinks they can keep this below total war. That is a very different problem. Iran thinks it can threaten the waterway and fire limited shots without forcing Washington into a huge response. Washington, on the other hand, thinks it can hit Iranian military assets and still keep diplomacy alive. And Israel thinks it can push in Lebanon while the bigger powers are too busy to stop it. Each side believes its own move is control. Each side sees the other's side move as reckless. That is how small fires get permission to spread. So what happens next? My bet is this. We get more limited exchanges before we get a final collapse. A drone incident near the strait, another strike on radar or launch sites, another dramatic statement from Tehran, another American line about self-defense, maybe a back-channel message through a third country, because even angry governments still need a way to talk when the public theater gets too hot. Then, the countermove to watch is not just military. It is diplomatic pressure on Israel. If Lebanon becomes the issue that blocks a US-Iran understanding, Washington may start leaning harder on Jerusalem to show the northern push. Not because Washington suddenly agrees with Tehran, but because the White House may decide that one ally's battlefield gain is becoming too expensive for the bigger deal. What would prove me wrong? Two things. First, an Iranian strike that kills American personnel, and second, a sustained and physically enforced Hormuz shutdown that major shipping firms cannot work around. Either one would shrink the off-ramps fast. And until then, I foresee a damaged ceasefire that survives in name, while the fighting keeps happening around its edges. Fragile, ugly, but not fully dead. And here's the uncomfortable takeaway. This ceasefire is not failing because nobody understands the risk. It is failing because everyone understands the risk and still think the next move can be managed. You can call that discipline, but I call it a dangerous kind of confidence. The Gulf is not yet in an all-out regional war, but the distance between controlled pressure and something broke is now much smaller than it looked in April. And when the world's oil rout, America's credibility, Iran's survival instincts, and Israel's battlefield ambitions all sit on the same table, one bad move does not stay local for long. That is where the story stands. The ceasefire is still on paper, but the fuse is back in the room. I would love to hear your read on this. Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you got something out of this, please like, share, and subscribe. Catch you in the next video.